Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
I'm Ray. How you doing?
Well, I'm Kelly. I'm good. Sorry, I'm nervous.
Hi, Christy. Christy, are you there? If you're there, we don't hear you. I don't see a little microphone by you, Christy. Oh, you with us now, Christy?
I am.
There you go. All right, now you got a little microphone. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Was that Miss Kelly I saw?
Yes. How are you?
Good. I'm at the MRI center for my daughter, but I'm out in the parking lot waiting.
I'm sorry. She okay?
Yeah, she had a soccer injury, and of course she's on the varsity basketball team and trying to get released to be able to play because she hates going to the tournament and sitting there. So I'm making her, because the soccer injury was pretty substantial. So I just don't want her messing it up long term.
No, you wouldn't want that.
But I really don't want to pay the copay. I mean, if we're being honest.
Right.
I was like, is this like serious? Like when you say it hurts, does it hurt worth $1,000 or is it like chocolate milk and you'll be good?
Yeah. My son went a whole baseball season when he was about 13 with a broken wrist because I didn't believe him because every time he mowed the lawn, he said it would hurt. But whenever he played baseball, it didn't hurt. At the end of the season, we took him in for another X-ray with a specialist, and the specialist comes out and says, "So how long have you had a broken wrist?" Since the beginning of summer, I think. And yeah, I felt like Father of the Year.
Well, if it makes you feel better, she broke her fibia and she was out there playing. The coach pulled her off and was like, I'm not letting her play anymore until she sees someone. And then our son playing football for Timberland, they were playing Big Howl, and he got crushed. And we're like, you're okay. Just get back out there because he would play the whole game. Well, it was actually an EMS firefighter that went down to the coach and said, listen, that's broke. You need to get him off. And sure enough, his collarbone was broken. So yeah, I was Mother of the Year with you, Ray. I was like, suck it up, get back out there.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
All right. We got a few people joining us still here. So Jolynn with us in her vehicle.
Sorry, I thought I had my mic on. Hello.
Hi.
I decided just to pull over at Buffalo Wild Wings. It was a good place to stop.
Yeah. Now, Jolynn, do you need to be somewhere right now? Do you want to speak first so that you can be somewhere, or are you good to?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Is that okay with you, Kelly?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll stay on for a little bit because I want to hear Kelly.
Okay. Yeah.
But
No, you're welcome to stay. I just didn't want you to be late for anything, or. Wasn't
yeah, I'm
sure.
sorry. I don't know why I misunderstood that whole thing and thought it was canceled. So that's why I apologize.
That's
Good thing
okay.
it was supposed to be in person. That would been really bad.
Well, as it happens, nobody signed up for the in-person part, which works out okay because we've had a little COVID outbreak here at our base. So we've got actually 5 people off tomorrow because of COVID. And there's only 13 people on a shift. So as you can imagine, we're doing a bunch of overtime.
That's how that works usually, I think. We have 4 at Rising Phoenix that are finishing it up right now out of 8 out there in Lincoln County. So
yeah, Lincoln County's kind of getting hit a little bit right now.
yeah.
Give it a few more minutes. Hello.
Hey. Trying to get my laptop set up right.
Yeah.
I know. I tried to set my phone on the dash, but it won't set. It keeps flopping everywhere. So I talk with my hands, so you guys are gonna be flying everywhere.
Well, that's kind of creepy when I do that. So here we go. All right.
Are you in the car too?
Yeah, I have 3 kids, and they won't leave me alone if I'm in the house.
That's funny.
Let's see. Christy, did you get knocked off?
I did.
Okay. You're back though.
I am.
Boy, I got to set more meetings at 6:30 so I can see the all your cars.
You don't want to see this.
I'm getting a great interior view of everyone's car.
Yeah, I
I'm
realized
sitting
that.
here in a seatbelt, like in park.
Yeah. Well, just in case. Just in case.
I
Safety
realize
matters.
there's no dome lights if there's a sunroof. I didn't ever thought about that.
Oh, we can see. Okay, you got parking lot
Yeah.
lights. All right. Well, I got 6:34. So in the interest of everybody's time, we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll just admit people as they come in. My name is Ray Antonacci. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Lincoln County CORE, which stands for Community Opioid Response Effort. We're modeling our effort, our CORE, after St. Charles County and the efforts that they've put forth in trying to, I don't know, I should say eradicate, but trying to reduce the number of deaths from heroin and other opioids. We've seen a rise in our community, and as EMS providers, I see that we can make a difference, and others in our community, like the health department and those who are in addiction rehab and things like that, have all joined together anywhere from people from churches to rehab centers. We've all come together to try to, I don't know, get this under control, if that can even happen. So tonight, what we've done, we've put together a couple speakers, trying to move this forward. COVID has really hampered our efforts at some community seminars and such. So what we've done is we've put together a couple speakers for tonight. We have Kelli Clodfelter. Pronounce your name for me.
Kelli Clodfelter.
Clodfelter, thank you.
Mhm.
And Jolynn Dubea, is that correct?
Mhm. Yes. Mhm.
And they're going to speak a little bit to us. I don't think this is going to go more than an hour, hour and a half. And we'll just take some questions afterwards for the speakers. Jolynn, would you like to start and tell us about who you are and what you do and some things about addiction that you experience?
Sure. I apologize. I thought that it was canceled, so I don't have the big exciting speech. But my name is Jolynn Dubea. I am a licensed counselor. I am the founder of Rising Phoenix Counseling Associates. We do drug court in St. Charles County, co-occurring drug court. And we also have an office down Lincoln County. We've been there since July. And we're working in addiction out there, and also with the Beauty for Ashes Foundation in the women's home there, right beside, what's the new restaurant in town? The big one?
You're talking about Babylon's?
Babylon, yes, right beside Babylon. So that's interesting. But so we do various things there, a variety of things, but related to addiction. Sorry. So I've been working in addiction since I was 18. I thought that would sound better than telling you how many years it's been. And it's interesting to watch how heroin had changed over the years, you know, and the addiction to the pain pills versus the other. At first, you know, it was, sorry, my brain is blank. There's people out in the parking lot and I'm getting distracted. I apologize. But as everybody knows, the opioid epidemic is basically a public health crisis, and it doesn't affect just certain people. Like the old heroin, back when I was very young, it was, you just saw people that were homeless, you know, a lot doing stuff like that, or they were in the streets. And this affects every gender, every socioeconomical situation. There's nobody that it kind of doesn't affect. And I had some great stats. I don't have them with me, but I know that in 2019, it was estimated that there's around 1,100, they weren't great stats, they were sad stats, but 1,100 people that were in the state of Missouri that had passed due to opioid overdose, and 98 of those came from Lincoln County. So I thought that was pretty high, considering we were just, Lincoln County is just a country town in my mind. But I guess the thing that I wanted to bring is that people in addiction and then their families, they don't have to do it alone. There's lots of great resources around. I know that there's resources on the website, but as far as Rising Phoenix goes, starting in January, because we just got there in Lincoln County, but in January, right now, we're taking names for a wait list, and we're going to be doing groups, day and evening groups for those in their addiction, and then separate groups for families, and then somehow coordinating those together as well. And we'll also probably end up doing something for the children. So we're just kind of trying to take the names right now and get everybody on a wait list so we know when to start off. And we do things a little different in the sense of we treat it as a co-occurring disorder. So we also treat any mental health issues along with the addiction, because I've found in my work that a lot of times the addiction comes because they're trying to treat a symptom of either depression, anxiety, or, you know, they hear voices, and instead of knowing to take medication, they do heroin instead, because it blocks everything. So we try to treat the whole person as far as wellness. I think that's about all I have, right? I know it's really short. Was there anybody have any questions about any of that?
So do you do faith-based rehab, or are you secular? How do you guys work?
We do both. So we'll have the same exact program running side by side, secular as faith-based. The only difference is that we'll include the scriptures and prayer, of course, in the faith-based part. So that way people have an option. They don't have to choose one or the other, and they're not, you know.
And
Okay.
do you provide medications for behavioral health disorders and MAT medications, such as Suboxone, Vivitrol, Subutex, or anything like that?
We do not. We have people that we're affiliated with that do it for us, and we're open to that. We're not that large yet.
Okay.
I can't see who's talking because it's, yeah.
Okay. And you take it all ages?
Yes, we take all ages, and right now we are not taking Medicaid, but we have a sliding scale fee as low as $20 a session for counseling, for individual counseling. So, but we do take regular insurances, and then our groups are $20 a group, or on the sliding scale it may be different depending on, you know, how things are for you personally. We're trying to serve the underserved is what we're trying to do. So as of January, we'll have 501c3 status and we'll be able to get more grants, and then have programs. We're going to develop programs that will be there to help the community better, because I feel like there is a big need.
Okay, excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Jolynn?
Hey, Jolynn. I'm Cynthia. I'm with American Addiction Centers. I've actually worked with Curtis a little bit.
Oh, awesome.
I think he works with you. Is that right?
Yes.
With him? Okay. So I think it's great that you guys are opening up a location in Lincoln County too. And did you say the one in St. Charles, you guys are running group therapy right now?
Yes, we do. We have day and evening groups for co-occurring disorders. We do
Okay.
yeah. So
Is
we're
it
affiliated
offered-
with St. Charles County Drug Court, but we also
Okay.
do probation and parole send people also. Go ahead.
Is it in person or virtual right now, or a mixture?
So right now we're doing in person, because
Okay.
we don't let the groups get bigger than 10, but we try to stay between 4 and 6 people in a group, because we're trying to do, and our version is quality, trying to do quality work, and so nobody can hide in the back of the room and not get their needs met. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
A lot of
And
sense.
if we have to break it down, what we're going to do is, like, say, for some reason, say COVID gets worse than it is now. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll literally take it down to where it's 2 people in a room, because we have interns who are very qualified. They have their masters. They're at the end of their masters, and they also are, I lost it, drug and alcohol certified. MADIC? I never said it right. Anyway, certified. And so they will actually sit and do 2 people at a time if they have to, if we overflow or something. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
What's your contact information if I need to send it? Because I get a lot of phone calls, and sometimes they're just looking for outpatient treatment at the time. So what's your contact number?
So the main number is 636-622-0345. And there's somebody that answers it 24 hours a day. It's an answering service. And
Okay.
then they dispatch it to us, and because we also have domestic violence unit and different things like that. So we just have one person that answers all of it. And then my email is Jolynn, it's JOLYNN at risingphoenixtherapy.com.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Jolynn. I appreciate your time. Go ahead and just stay on the call, and we'll let Kelli speak, and I'll tell her story. It's a very interesting story. And Kelli, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kelli Clodfelter. I started speaking about 6 years ago due to our life situation. But I definitely want to give you a little bit of background because I think it's important. So I was born in an all military family. I am the only girl and I'm the baby. So super strict parents, really good household. Mom and dad's married. I guess as good as it gets. But at a very young age, I began struggling with several things, weight, how I looked at myself, um, how I didn't compare to other girls my age. You can't see me, but I'm 5'10" and I've been this tall since I was 13. So, you didn't get to borrow your friends' or their shoes because I wear a size 11. Just, important things when you're a kid. And so at a very young age, I was in softball. That was kind of my saving grace. But as I got a little older, I put myself in a really bad position. I was 13. I lied to my parents. I was supposed to be going to a movie theater and I didn't. I went with my best friend over to these two guys' house. They were older than us. They were 16 and 17. And before that situation ended, I found myself in a really bad spot and I got raped that night. Well, in my head at 13, I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't tell my parents because I was at fault. I lied. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. So I kept it to myself. That was the beginning of a whole lot of bad decisions. I think that I was just trying to find love and didn't know the difference between what sex and love was. And what that ended up being is me 15, married, and having a baby. So that's where my life begins. Up to this point, some of the worst things I'd ever done was, drink some Strawberry Hill wine and smoke some cigarettes. Really hadn't dabbled in anything. Well, as I got older, by the time before I was 21, I had 3 boys. And once again, overweight, an abusive husband, physically and mentally. Once again, didn't want anyone to know that because I wanted the perfect family. I wanted to be married to the man who was my children's father. I wanted to just not have to tell my dad he was right. So I kept a lot of that to myself. And I knew that Billy, my husband, was angry a lot and it seemed to come out on me. But what I didn't know is that Billy was an addict and he was a meth addict. And one day he came home and he was actually nice to me. I was 19 and he walked in and he had some stuff and said that I could smoke it. And at that time I smoked cigarettes. I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. And he wanted to do something with me. So it sounded like a great idea. This would be the first time that I smoked methamphetamine. What I didn't know was that I'm an addict through and through. And methamphetamine took over my life at that point. It's crazy that I could be an addict for several years and everything seemed like a whirlpool, just happened so quickly. It went from smoking meth on the weekends to smoking meth during the week to smoking meth to be able to function. Up until this point, I'd always had a job. Billy didn't work. Well, he did. He had 25 jobs in 5 years, but he didn't stay with any jobs. So I always worked. I always paid for daycare because I didn't want my kids to be home with him. Once I started using, that all slipped away very quickly. You lose your focus of who you are, where you came from. And luckily, pretty quickly my husband, I guess, one thing that I can say about doing drugs was that it gave me an ability to be strong and to stand up for myself because I wasn't scared anymore. And so I would stand up to Billy and I would fight back, and he went to jail and I divorced him. My dad was eager to help that happen. He had no idea. My parents had no clue that I was using drugs. I told them that I cleaned houses for a living, kind of made up for why I was here and there and everywhere. And I had a roommate, and my roommate was my nanny. She took care of the kids while I ran and did whatever it is I needed to do. I soon found out after I divorced Billy that he had been selling drugs because people kept coming to our house looking for him. And finally, someone had told me, well, if he's not here, do you have anything? And I figured out what was going on. I had a Coke machine in my house. My father worked for Coca-Cola after he retired from the Navy. And I opened that Coke machine and it was full of drugs. And so I started selling. It was easy. People were coming and I had it. And so I just started selling. And I won't lie, I think after being in a relationship with somebody who was so physical, mean, mentally abusive, it felt good to feel in charge. And when you're the person who has drugs, you kind of are that person. You know, everybody's nice to you. Everybody wants to be your friend. Of course, because they just want what you have, but it really doesn't matter at that point. So I continued doing that. I finally got busted. The house that I had been being a part of got busted and I wasn't there. So I was coming down the road and the police pulled me over, and I had just left this young lady's house that it was the one that told on the people that owned the home. And I went over there, to be honest with you, to beat her up because that's what you do. What I didn't know was that that's against the law. Even though I didn't put my hands on her, I threatened her and she was a state witness, and that is called intimidating a state witness. So I got arrested that day. That's the day that my parents found out everything. They jumped in immediately. They got my kids, and I'm so grateful for that because my children never had to deal with being in foster care or the system or, you know, all the things that a lot of these kids have had to do because of their parents' bad choices. But the one thing that happened after my parents took my kids is I think that was kind of the only thing that kept me as level as you can be as an addict, because I had to provide for them and I had to do right by them. And once they took my kids, that's when things progressed very quickly in my addiction. That's when I became a user by needle. I became a junkie. Talk about your life spinning out of control really quickly. So many things happened in my time of using. I've had guns at my head. I've had guns at people. I've jumped on cars and broke out windshields over $20. I was just a very angry addict. Eventually, after 7 felony convictions, because, once they got your number, you're just going to keep getting in trouble and you're just going to keep going to jail until you change your ways. 7 felony convictions and 2 years on the run because the courts let me leave. I was getting sentenced to a boot camp. And the courts let me leave on my own recognizance because I had a hell of a way of manipulating people. I didn't look the part of an addict. I had the right words. I knew what to say. With my bondsman and lawyer both suggesting to the judge at that point, do not let her leave, the judge allowed me to leave. I'll be honest, that day, I really did feel like I was going to come back the next day. I had 24 hours to take care of my personal affairs. But the next day when I showed up, I had went and bought white t-shirts and boxers and socks and, all that good stuff that you want to try to have when you're going to be in jail for a while. And we pulled up to the jailhouse and my legs were like spaghetti. I just could not imagine getting out of the car and walking in and saying, okay, I'm here to give you my freedom. Not to mention, I'm still a junkie. Like I'm still thinking about not getting high. And when I go to jail, I'm not going to be able to get high again. And, then what? Because every time I started to get clean, and I've been to rehab more times than you can count your fingers because the court sent me all the time. The thought of not being able to get high, I couldn't imagine, because then I would have to deal with what was inside of me, because let's be honest, you use because you hurt. And every time you try to get sober, you remember all the shitty things you've done and all the people you've hurt. And I don't have some sob story to tell you about how I grew up watching my folks do this stuff, because I didn't. I had to answer to people who were good people who didn't know anything about this life. And that was just the worst feeling in the world. And I just didn't want to deal with it. So I ran. 2 years later, by this point, I'm now manufacturing. I am, I think, yes, I was an addict, but I also think I was very addicted to the life of the fast pace, the being in control, being important. And I think that was just as much of the addiction as the drug itself. So by the time I got busted manufacturing. I went in on a false alias. I was going to bond out the next day. And my father had heard, and by the way, I'd been arrested several times in between all this, and went in under false aliases. If you look me up, there's all kinds of AKAs in this world with my name. But this time, my father heard I was in jail, and he called up there and he told them who I was and that I was wanted. He saved my life. I stayed in county jail for a year. I put myself through a drug program in county to try to help, because I was facing 21 years total. So I got through the 1-year drug program, and they ran all my sentences together. So they were 7 years consecutive. I was in Oklahoma. That's where we landed after my father being retired and all that good stuff. I was born in Virginia. I've been around all around. But there's a place called Lexington in Oklahoma, and that is where you go from county to be processed. It almost sounds like an animal, right? to go to this place. And so for a year, I'd been in county, and county life is one thing, and you adapt. I was always working the game. I turned it into where the guys weren't the only ones that got to get out and clean, and I started getting to mow, and I used all my manipulation skills to be able to have some type of life in county. And working and getting out of the pod was my biggest want in life at that time. So all I remember is it was about 1:30 in the morning, and the doors start popping. It's a very familiar noise when you get locked up. And I was pulling chains, which meant that they came to get me and everybody else that was going to prison that night. And I happened to be the only girl. So here I am, big bad Kelli, who, has done all these crazy things. And I will tell you, I was scared shitless. I didn't have anybody going with me, and it was just a bunch of guys. And I knew them all from the streets, but it was still very scary. We got into the bus. They took us to Lexington. Like I said, late at night, we pull up to this place, and it is razor wire everywhere. I remember looking at an officer. His name was Falkenberry, and he had been at county with me for a year. And I told him I needed to go to the bathroom. And he looked at me and he said, "Sweetheart, you don't belong to me anymore. You're going to have to talk to these guys." And it feels like it was a second later. There was this man in my face yelling at me, like his spit was landing on me as he's yelling at me to get to this certain spot and stand against the wall. And they took me in this room, and they took all my clothes from me, and they gave me this orange jumpsuit. I had nothing on underneath it. All the buttons were broke, so I was holding it together. And they put me in this cell by myself. I remember it was the coldest place I'd ever been in my life. No blankets, nothing like that. Was there for a very, very long time. And eventually they brought in a bag of food. The bologna was green. And I thought, holy hell, where am I? So I got processed, and I thought, I'm just a drug addict, right? I'm just going to go to a minimum yard. It's not going to be a big deal. Well, come to find out, since I had ran for 2 years, I was high risk. And I went to maximum security prison. And once again, probably saved my life. By going to maximum security prison for 2 years, I realized that I was no different than any other woman that was in there. They were all in there because of drugs. You know, some of their offenses were worse. People got killed or children got hurt, or, you know, but here's the thing, that could have been me. In all the places and all the things that I did, I realized that that could be me. I'm no different than them, but I'm fortunate. And I wasn't going to let this opportunity get by. So I busted my ass. I had a job in there. I worked every single day. I stayed out of trouble. I went to any group that I could get into. I did everything I could do to be able to get home. And finally, I got sent down to minimum, which was a lot closer to my family, so I could see my family more, my kids. And I remember I had a court date, and I thought I was going home. I was supposed to go home. And so my mom came, and she brought my boys with her. And I was so excited. I thought I was getting to go home. And then I realized that I had charges out of 2 counties, and I still had to go back before the other county before I could go home. So I ended up still in shackles and cuffs and had to go back to the yard and wait for a month until my lawyer could get me a court date. So the next time we went to court, I told my mom not to bring the boys. I just kind of felt like, you know, I didn't. Once you get sober and you have to look into the eyes of the people that you hurt, it's life-changing. So that day, I got to go home. My boys had no idea. My mom picked me up, and she said that we were going to stop at a Walmart, and I was really excited, right? Like, it's been 30 years. I hadn't been any place. And then we went into Walmart, and I had a full-out anxiety attack. I did not realize, but very quickly you become institutionalized, and the amount of people everywhere, and I guess just the ability of free moving, and I don't know really, but I remember having to run out to the van, and I couldn't breathe, and I realized that, you know, I'm a different person. So we got home, we went by my grandma's where the boys were, and my son, Jordan, he's my middle boy. He was 7, and Thomas was 9. And Jordan was riding down my grandma's road on a bicycle. And we pulled up next to him, and I remember rolling down the window, and I said, "Hey, Bubba." And he flipped his bike. And he jumped up, and he said, "Oh my God, did you escape?" So I told him, "No, I'm home." And I wrapped him up, and I hugged him, and this was the beginning of my new life. So I immediately, you know, when you get out of prison, there's lots of things you have to face. You have restitution, you have a parole officer, you have all this stuff going on. You don't just get to go figure out how to live. So immediately I needed a job. It was October. So I went to work there's a place called The Castle. It's where they have like haunted houses and stuff. And so I got a job cleaning bathrooms behind drunks. And that was awesome. But it was money, and I could pay my restitution, because if you don't pay your restitution and your fines, you go back. And that was definitely not happening. So I did that until I was able to find another job. And that job was McDonald's. So I was 26 years old, and I was working at McDonald's, and my supervisor probably wasn't a day over 17. And she said like more times than a human being should say in a lifetime every single day. And I wanted to rip her face off. But like my dad told me, how bad do you hate it? Then find another job, because you don't quit a job till you got a job. Like I said, I got a military daddy. And so when I moved in home with them, I didn't get a bedroom. The boys had their own bedrooms. My parents put me in the laundry room on a rollaway bed. And basically that I was fortunate I had that. And so that's how I was living. I found a job at a factory finally, because if you've ever tried to find employment as a convicted felon, especially one that just got out of the pen, people don't tend to hire you quickly, and they don't take time to hear why you were there. I could have been a rapist or a murderer or anything as far as they were concerned. They didn't want to know the story. They didn't have time for the story. So once a factory offered me a job, I was one of 2 women in the entire factory. And we packaged tools and we loaded 150-pound boxes in trucks all day. I needed that in my life because, one, when you're in recovery, you need to stay as busy as you possibly can. You don't need free time. Idle time is bad time. And they would give me as many hours as I could work. So that worked out good. I also needed exercise because I was very healthy. In prison, you know, the most you make at that time was $16 a month. That's about enough to take a shower every day and, you know, some ramen noodles. And ramen noodles will swell a woman up like nobody's business. So working out, going to work every day, doing what I need to do. Finally got a truck. My dad sold me a truck. I had wheels. I had a valid driver's license, which I hadn't had in a very long time. I actually had to go back and take the tests and everything again because my license had been suspended so long ago from all of my incidents. I kept working there. I ended up meeting my husband now, and we started dating. At that time, I decided that I needed to make sense out of what happened in my life. And I thought the best way that I could do that would be to become a substance abuse counselor. And that way, all those years of going to rehab and not paying attention to anything anybody ever had to say to me, because it always felt like they were talking to me out of a book and they had no way of relating to me. I thought, what better way than to become a substance abuse counselor and then be able to relate to people and let them know you've been there. So I put myself in college. So I had my own place. I stayed in my parents' house for 6 months. That's how long it took me to get wheels and get a little bitty house. And then I was out. And I put myself in college. My husband now and I moved in together. We ended up getting married. And I got through 4 years of college, and I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. And by this point, my husband had been going to welding school. We had a baby, and she was 7 months old. Her name is Bailey. And he got offered a job in Missouri after he got out of welding school. So we packed up everything, and we moved to Missouri. So by this time I had left my job, and I had been working at a place called Tulsa Center for Behavioral Health when I was still in Oklahoma. And I worked on the co-occurring unit. So I ran groups, I took care of clients, all that good stuff of individuals who suffered from mental illness and substance abuse. And eventually funding got cut, and some of the first programs to go were addiction. And so then I moved into completely on the psych ward, working with individuals in the crisis unit as they came in. So I did that until my husband got the job in Missouri. We moved here. And then I kind of had to start the whole battle all over again, trying to get a job. I was working for the state of Oklahoma when I left for 5 years, but now I couldn't find a job. I ended up taking a job at a truck stop. So I have a bachelor's degree and I work at a truck stop. And then I put myself in college for my master's degree at Maryville University. I ended up getting my master's degree for rehabilitation counseling. During this time, a lot of things had taken place. My daughter, of course, got older, and my son, Jordan, started having a lot of issues. He was in and out of the hospital a lot, psychiatric issues. We couldn't figure out what was going on. I was getting educated, but not quick enough because, you know, you believe that when a doctor tells you something, that that's what's best. And now I know that you question everything no matter what. My son got put on a lot of different medications. And before I knew it, he burned our house down. I didn't know at that time that he did it on purpose, but he did. And he thought if he burned the house down, we would pack up and go back to Oklahoma. So we got through that. We, after that, some more incidents happened with my son where he got arrested, and I had to press charges against him so that I could try to get him help, because no one would help me. I had begged the juvenile system. I had begged the schools. I knew there was something more going on with my son and no one would listen. And he finally did something big enough that we could do this. So he spent 2 days in juvenile hall, which gave me enough time to fight to prove that he needed to be put into a hospital and get true psychiatric testing, which is something he couldn't get. He finally did. He was in a program for 7 months. He was at Edgewood, and he got diagnosed, and my son was bipolar. And so he had been so many different things, so many different medications. And because of his true diagnosis, when he hit puberty and he was on these meds and then the bipolar, that's what happened when he reacted and started making these harsh decisions and bad things started happening. Got all the charges dropped, which thank God, because that's not what we wanted to have to do, but we got him dropped. Jordan came home and life started getting better. I had gotten a job. Jordan's counselor called me one day. I was at school and said, you know, this is weird and I don't know if you do it, but we'd like to ask you to take an interim position as the executive director at the sheltered workshop in Warrenton, Missouri. I had no idea what a sheltered workshop was. I remember calling my dad crying because I didn't know if I should do it, because if it didn't work out, I wouldn't have a job again. And then I might not have my truck stop job, you know, making $8.25 an hour. But in my world, that was a big deal. And of course, my dad, being the amazing man he is, he told me I could do anything I set my mind to, and to go for it. So I did. That was the beginning of a whole new career for me. I took over the workshop, and in this time, I was in my last year of my master's degree. I'd been at the workshop for I was going in my 4th year, and I got pregnant my last year in my master's degree with my daughter Grace. Was not the plan. Actually, we had started talking about possibly my husband getting fixed because we were getting old, but God had another plan for us. So I graduated in May of 2014, May 3rd, 2014. I walked across the stage, very pregnant. May 13th, my oldest son, Thomas, graduated high school here at Warrenton. June 20th, my daughter Grace was born. And the plan was I was getting ready to take my licensure. I was going to take it in November. So I was kind of just taking some time in. I'd been in school for 7 years. I'd held a full-time job. I did my interim practicum and all that good stuff. So that's like a whole nother job. And I managed to have 2 kids in this time. So life was like, finally, I was breathing again. We bought our first house. I'd never bought a house in my life. We had vehicles that you didn't have to work on every day on the way to work. We bought our house in a nice area. We have a big community lake. I was really proud of where we were. And all I really wanted to do was to, I think ever since I got out of prison, I was always trying to make up for the years of the things that I didn't do right. And it felt like I was finally getting there. And life changed very quickly. On October 7, 2014, I was at work and my phone was ringing. I picked it up and all I could hear was my babysitter. And she said, that Grace wasn't breathing. I don't really know what happened in that moment. I was told that a sound came out of me that no one had ever heard come out of a human. I drove a really big pickup truck. I remember running out the door and screaming, "My daughter's not breathing." And I jumped in my truck and I was hauling ass. I was trying to get to my kid. When I got up the road, I was right in front of the bank. I was laying on my horn. I was screaming out my window for people to get out of my way. And this emergency vehicle came out, and the guy looked at me, and he must have just put two and two together. I'm sure he heard the call, and he put his lights on, and he got everybody out of the way, and I followed him, and we flew down 47 trying to get out there. We got to the golf course, and he pulled in, and I remember yelling at him and cussing at him because he was trying to take my keys. And somewhere in the midst of this, I've talked to my husband on the phone. They talked to my husband on the phone, but he finally said, "We have to stop. The ambulance has her, and they're about to pass us." And I remember standing in that parking lot, and I watched that ambulance go by, and all I could think of was my 3-month, 17-day-old baby was in that ambulance. My cousin showed up. We jumped in her car, and we felt like the longest drive of my life. We had to get to Lake St. Louis. That's where they took my daughter. My husband beat me there. I remember when I walked in, I seen this nurse, and she knew, and she grabbed me and she grabbed my husband, and it's not like the movies or anything. They took us into this room, and this room was where our daughter was, and it felt like there were just 20 people standing around her, and I could just see little pieces of her, and they were all touching her, and they were all doing stuff. And finally the doctor walked over to me, and she said, "We're going to stop. We're going to give you your baby." And she's gone. The room seemed really bright. I remember that the clock said 2 o'clock, and they handed me my daughter. And I remember, sometimes you hear those stories, those miracle stories where babies are born and they're not breathing, and then their mother holds them and then they breathe. And I grabbed Grace, and I held her as tight as I could, and I heard air, and then I heard my husband say, "Be careful, she's incubated." So for just a split second, I thought she breathed. I held my daughter for a really long time, hours. The time came, the coroner came, and my friend was there, and they said that I would want to leave the room. I can imagine they had to put her in something. So my friend said she would hold her and take care of her, and then we walked out. And then I had to go home without my daughter. So we went home, and my oldest son was home. He had actually been living in Texas, and he had gotten a job up there, and he just happened to be visiting, which thank God he did, because he would have never met his sister if he hadn't. I remember telling him that I needed Jordan. Where was Jordan? He finally told us where Jordan was. My friend went to get Jordan. We went through so much that Jordan and I's bond was just a little different than me and the rest of my kids. It's like I grew up with the boys, I was a kid too. And he went to rehab with me. He lived in our house when all we had is a mattress. We just went through a lot together. It's like we were always picking each other up, and when he went through everything with his bipolar, I was there every day through everything. And when he walked in the house that day, I was standing on my deck, and I seen him come in, and I ran in. And at this time, my boys are like 6'1", size 14 feet. They're big boys. And I told him that Grace had died. And I remember big old crocodile tears coming down his face. And he just grabbed me. And for that moment, I was the child, And Jordan Jordan had been going through his own struggles. He had turned 17. He quit taking his bipolar med. He left the house because I made him take his medication. I made him follow the rules. I made him do things. He found out at 17 you can leave the house in Missouri, and we can't legally do anything because I tried. But he'd been gone doing what he wanted to do, quit going to school, quit taking his medication because it made him gain a lot of weight. But that day he looked at me and he said, "I'm coming home, Mom." He said, "I'm going to be here and we're going to get through this together." And he meant it with all his heart. So at that time, this is my family the day that we had Grace's funeral. This is Jordan, my husband, Sheldon, our daughter Bailey. She was 4 when this happened. And then this is my oldest son, Thomas. This is my daughter, Grace. So somehow we got through all that. Somehow we got through a funeral. Somehow we got through craziness. But things were really hard on Jordan because for the first time in his life, I wasn't strong, and I wasn't. I was walking through my house, crying in the middle of the night, screaming out my daughter's name. I had lost it, to say the least. And I think that was hard for Jordan because in his eyes, I was the strongest person he'd ever known. And I'm not, and I wasn't. 2 weeks after Jordan had come home, and we were all trying to get through this together, Jordan starts an argument with his dad about going back to school. When I say his dad, it's my husband because that's who's raised him since he was 8. And I think he did that so that he could storm out. What I didn't know is during this few months that since Jordan had turned 17, that he had been doing pills. I had no idea. I always drug tested my kids when they lived at home because the odds of one of them using drugs was pretty high. I'm a drug addict and their biological father is a drug addict. The worst I ever caught my kids doing was smoking weed. And I made a huge deal about it, which they thought I was an idiot, but at the same time, I know how things go. But Jordan had been doing pills. And so probably about 2 weeks into being at home, he was probably feeling that. And he left. We talked every single day. I had not been counseling. I had a full case of counseling and I was working full time at the sheltered workshop. And then the day that I went back to counsel, and my specialty was youth. I loved working with teenagers. And I was going back that day, and Jordan had agreed to come home that night. And I was excited. I'd been working really hard for a few weeks to try to get him to come home because I worried every single day, every single night, because once you lose a child, that's all you think about, And so that day I'd seen a client. I was actually on my way to go see a client, and I was going to pick up Jordan after. I was coming down the road and I seen him walking over where he had been staying at. And I was late. I was trying to get to my client because I'd go to their houses. So I honked at him and I waved because I'll be back in an hour to pick him up, right? After my client, I went to go pick him up. He wasn't there. And I couldn't find him and he wouldn't answer my messages. And so I went home and I called my husband and I said, Jordan wasn't there. He said, "What do you mean? I just seen him." I said, "Where?" He said, "At Walmart." He said, I told him, my husband and Bailey, my daughter, who was 4, had ran into Jordan and said, "I thought you were coming over for dinner." And he said, "Oh, I am. My friends are going to drop me off." Sheldon didn't think anything of it. He picked up his baby sister. He hugged her, told her he loved her. And then my husband came home and we cooked and I made his plate. And I let his plate sit there for a long time, and then I put it in the fridge, and then I wrapped it up and put it back in the fridge. And, you know, I hadn't slept in a long time. I couldn't sleep at night. And I don't know why this night, but I slept, and my phone was a piece of crap, and it didn't ring. It only vibrated. And my son called me at 12:30 that night, but I wouldn't get that message till the next day. 6:30 in the morning, my phone is ringing. There's somebody banging on my door. My dogs are barking. I remember answering the phone, and I heard someone say, "Are you Jordan Lunsford's mom?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "You need to get to the hospital as soon as possible." They wouldn't tell me what was going on. I opened the door. It was the police. They said they didn't know what was happening, but they were told to tell me to get to the hospital as soon as I could. So by this time, my husband had already been contacted. He'd sent someone to come pick me up and someone to come get our daughter. And I made that drive again. And I ran through those doors again. And I was met by the same nurse again. And at that moment, she realized who I was, because Gracie was Gracie Clodfelter and Jordan was Jordan Lunsford. But I was both of their mothers. And if I had paid attention then in that moment, I would have probably seen it in her face. But she took me to this room, and I walked in, and to be honest, the things that went through my head, you know, Jordan he was a scrapper. He used to worry me when he'd get in fights, because nowadays kids, they use knives and guns, and Jordan didn't. And I guess in my head, I thought that he got stabbed, or he got shot. That's what I was thinking. And I went in the room, and my son looked perfect. He was laying there, and he had all these tubes coming out of him. And I remember going, and I moved the covers, and I was looking at his body, and I looked at the doctor, and I said, "What the hell is going on?" And he said, "Ma'am, your son overdosed on heroin." I didn't even know what to say. Heroin. Where the hell did my kid get heroin? And why the hell would he do that? So I spent that entire day. All our family came back from Oklahoma and Texas and Missouri, and we are in ICU, and I'm begging God. I'm begging God, right? Like, there's no way that God is going to let me lose 2 children in 5 weeks. That's just not, that doesn't happen, you know? And so I believed, and I believed with everything I had. And I laid there all night next to him, and I held his hand, and I took his contacts out of his eyes because I just knew they were hurting him. And I rubbed my fingers through his hair, and I just begged him, and I begged God. I didn't even care what condition he was in, just to let me keep him. And I didn't even know that's super selfish at the moment. I really just didn't give a shit. I just couldn't lose him. The next day, the doctors came in. They'd been running tests on his brain, and it was 3:00 in the afternoon, and the doctor took myself in and my husband. And at this time, Billy, which is, you remember Billy from way back when, the biological dad, and we went into a room, and the doctor was there, and there was a man next to him that I didn't recognize. And the doctor said, as of 3:00 this afternoon, your son has been declared clinically brain dead, and that is the time of his death. So the guy that was next to him was the guy who wanted to talk to me about his organs, because we're talking about a 17-year-old viable kid, right? With good organs that people need. And that's how it works. There's not time to think about it. Jordan made that decision really easy for me because he had a Donate Life bracelet on, and he had been wearing it for I don't even know how long, all the time. And the kid had a heart of gold. And I knew that he would want to do that. So I said yes. And then the next job was that I needed to walk across the hall to the ICU waiting room and tell my family and tell his big brother that he just lost another sibling. So I went over there and I told him, and I remember watching Thomas melt in his chair and just all 6'2" of himself down to the floor, and I am trying to hold him like he's 2 because I can't fix it. I can't fix it. So that night, we got to stay with him until they came, because when they're gonna harvest organs, they another hospital that specializes in that has to come get them. So it was 11:30 at night. There was ice on the roads. We wrapped Jordan up real tight in this warming blanket, and I thanked him for letting me be his mom. And I told him how much I loved him and how much I was gonna miss him. And I told him I was sorry that I didn't save him. And then I walked him out to an ambulance and I helped load him up, and I kissed my warm son for the last time. And then he drove away. And then I had to go home. So somehow we got through all that stuff again. Same church, same everything. You know, I don't know how I have made it this far, because I didn't think I could make it a minute, then I didn't think I could make it an hour, and now I've made it 6 years. We just passed it. This is Jordan. This was taken in August before he passed away on November 15th. It wasn't very long after this happened that I knew I had to do something, because if I didn't, I was gonna die. I don't know how, but I was gonna die. So we got in contact with Stop Heroin, and we put on a walk here in Warrenton. We stirred up a lot of stuff. You know, nobody really wanted to talk about it. I had no idea how many people had died from it, because it wasn't something you talked about. The city really didn't want a walk going on. They didn't want to talk about heroin. They didn't want to be known as a town that people died from heroin. And I informed them that, but we are, and we need to talk about it. And then I'm going to talk about it. And so we put on a walk, and over 500 people attended. And it was amazing. And we did that in January. So we moved pretty quick. And then I decided that I needed to do something to help the kids in this town, because there's nothing. And so we decided we were going to open a youth center. And that's a lot of work. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I needed to be a 501(c)(3). I needed to find money, because I don't have a lot of that. I work for a nonprofit. And so we started working on that. It started with a napkin at Denny's and ideas. And it went from 2 people to 3 people to 6 people to 10 people. In the meantime, while we were working on that, I started a program called SAVE. And every month, we have a panel of people who come in and speak for an hour. and people are court ordered through drug court or through their PO or whatever the case may be. And they come to our class where they hear stories like this, but they also hear stories of people who made it and where they are. And they hear stories from police officers and ambulance drivers and coroners, because I want to bring that connection back, because when you're on the other side of drug addiction, you feel like it's you against them. And you forget that these people, they carry this with them too. And some of my closest friends are the people who served my children and who tried to save their life. And so we've been doing that for 6 years. Every month. COVID only got me 1 month. I only shut down 1 month. But outside of that, we do that every single month. The money, because we charge $30 for the class if you're court ordered for you to get a certificate. The money went to help pay bills at Jordan's Place when we opened it. So July of 2015, we opened Jordan's Place. And it started with Jordan's pool table and some tables and some TVs and Jordan's PlayStation, just kind of a hangout. Eventually it turned into 3 pool tables, arcade games, a food pantry that we fed the community and the kids every single day. We ran Jordan's Place for 4 years and we ran it on all volunteer. We couldn't pay anybody. And I think that's probably what got me to the point where we decided we had to close in January of 19. Because I lived there more than I was at home. And I served an age group of kids that my kids weren't, so they weren't there. And I had to come to terms with, I needed to be at home with my family. And I had hoped by that point that our community would step up and parents would get involved and want to be a part of it, but it just didn't happen. So we did close our doors, and I kept doing SAVE. In the meanwhile, I forgot to tell you, just months after all this happened, God blessed me with being pregnant. I was mad as hell at God because I wanted to drink beer and smoke cigarettes because that's what felt good. And when you're pregnant, you can't do that. So I think now, looking back, of course, he was saving me again because I was losing myself. And he knows well enough that if I'm pregnant, I'm going to do the right thing. And that's what I did. And my daughter was born right after the 1-year date of losing my daughter Grace, and in between the dates of losing Grace and losing Jordan. She was born on October 23rd, 2015, and her name is JC, and she is named after Jordan and Gracie. And she is wonderful, and she is the only one of us that you don't see pain in her eyes, and she runs and she's so full of life and she's so full of energy, and she reminds me that there's still life to be lived. So I fight hard every single day to be the best person that I can be. I did leave the sheltered workshop, but I took over handicap services, which is the fun part of my world. Because at the workshop, I had to make everybody work, but handicap services, we run day programs and we run residential homes and we run Special Olympics, and that's the good stuff. And so I coach Special Olympics, and I oversee the directors that run all of our wonderful programs. JC is 5 now, and Bailey is about to be 11, and Thomas is 26. And life is, it's getting, I'm getting better. I'll never be who I was. I cry way too easy. And I love with everything I got. Today's world is hard. There are anniversaries of deaths, there are birth dates, and there are holidays, and all those things are really hard. And there's not one single day that I don't wake up thinking about my kids, and there's not one single night that I go to bed and I don't think about my kids. There's many times that I wonder. I shared with you my addiction. If anybody deserved to die from their addiction, it was me. It wasn't my 17-year-old kid who made a bad decision. So I deal with that. And I share my story, and I just hope that maybe it'll make a difference somewhere to somebody. And I hope that another parent doesn't have to walk through this journey, because it's one I wouldn't wish upon anybody. And I thank you guys for allowing me to speak tonight.
Kelli, that was very powerful. I'm kind of speechless. I guess everybody, pretty much everybody on this call works in this field, and I think hearing your story, I don't know, I don't know. I know several people in my life that really need to hear your story. I did record this. Do you mind if we play this for anybody that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ray, this is
Yeah.
Chris. I just wanted to step in. Kelli, every time I hear you speak, anytime we'd have coffee, anytime we just pick up the phone and call each other, you're always an inspiration. But I think one of the parts too that maybe you could share for people is the struggle you also had to go through after with Jordan's death because of the crime and the re-traumatization of that for doing the right thing. Would you mind sharing?
So we definitely went after the people that were responsible with Jordan. Jordan was in a house with an individual who was in his mid-20s, but definitely looked more like he was Jordan's age. He was also there with a woman who was just a couple years younger than myself. And there were lots of people there that night. And when Jordan, the lady who was my age, had been taking Jordan and having him steal at the stores, that's what he was doing at Walmart that night. My husband seen him, and then she would take the stuff and pawn it. And she would give my son Xanax. And so she had been giving my son Xanax all night. And then they got home to this guy Rico's house, and she then gave him a line of heroin, and my son snorted heroin. Between the Xanax and the heroin, it's a deadly combination. And Jordan started as, it's crazy we're talking about this because I'm going through a lot of stuff at home right now of going through my house and letting things go, because I became quite the hoarder because you don't want to let anything go. And I just read the statements again from the young lady who wrote statements that night. And she said that he was breathing funny and that she wanted to call 911 and they wouldn't let her. And they took her phone from her, and that they picked my son up and they carried him to the car, and that they drove him 22, 23 miles before they dropped him at the hospital. So I was determined that my son was not going to die in vain, that somebody was going to take responsibility, because they were all adults. And I don't care what the state of Missouri says, 17-year-old boy is not an adult. And so we went after them, and oh my God, what a journey. I met my friend Juan, who was with the DEA at the time. And we just started, I mean, I felt like I was a police officer. I mean, I was hunting people down. I was finding out who was getting the dope from Rico, and I was turning it in. Every overdose, you know, when they lived, we would get up there, we would get their phone, we'd get the information. Eventually we got him, and he got arrested, and not directly towards what happened to my son for him, but we did get the lady, her name was Bridget Clean, or is Bridget Clean. We did get her directly to my son because Justin Unger, who is now a detective in Warrenton and one of my bestest friends in the world, because back then he was just an officer, but he was determined to get answers about Jordan's death. He had had incidents with Jordan in the past, and he just knew he was a good kid, and he didn't give up. And so he got her cornered up, and he questioned her, and in her trying to be defensive, said, I didn't give him any heroin, I just gave him Xanax. Well, dummy, that's against the law too. So we got her in court, and Judge Dalton was the judge, and also became a very good friend of mine. And he let me take the stand. And I remember I was told you can't talk to her, but I did, and he let me. And I got to look in her eyes, and I just needed her to see she was a mother. You know, I found that out. She had kids of her own. And she got, I don't even remember how much time. I remember so much craziness happened. She's already out. She wasn't even in 2 years. I did more time than she did. But I remember that day getting to finally look at her because that was important to me. And I remember her somewhat looking like she was crying while I think she thought that she was going to get out that day because she'd been in county for a while. And Judge Dalton hit her with 8 years. That's what it was. He gave her the max he could give her for distribution. And that's when she really cried. And we went through a lot of court. We were in court, out of court, in court, out of court. I remember when we went through Rico's court case, I didn't get to testify, but I went to the court. I was there every single day, and I sat right behind him every single day. And I remember when we left after he got sentenced, we left, and a guy came up to me, and he was an undercover, and he was a big guy, and he was shaking and crying, trying to talk to me and my husband, and he was apologizing to us because they had been watching Rico's house. But they couldn't just run in on him, and they knew what they were doing. And he just kept telling me he was sorry because if he had gotten in that house, that night would have never happened. It just reminds you of how many people are affected. You know, I remember as a drug addict, I would think, this is my body, and I'm not hurting nobody but myself, so why is everybody on my case? And what I tell you is that it affects everybody. There's people that's never met my son a day in their life, and it's affected them. But is that kind of what you wanted me to talk about, Christy, the court? Okay.
Thank you.
Kelli, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a powerful one. Does anybody have any questions for Kelli?
Kelli, this is Christine. I have to tell you, I've heard a lot of talks. I had to get up and get the Kleenex. This was, without question, the most moving, extraordinary and authentic talk I have ever listened to. To say I was moved is an understatement. You know, a lot of times they say, you know, our pain, you know, the opposite side of that is the impact. And I'm telling you, girl, you are a 10 on the Richter scale. So don't lose sight of that. I know that you know that, but I just want to encourage you in that. You should be speaking everywhere all the time.
Thank you.
Because it's that powerful. That powerful. You know, God has a strange way. You know, I wrote down the name of all your children, and I wrote their ages down. And I wrote your name down. JC. How do you spell JC?
Jayceee.
CEE. I was close. So, you know, and I had somebody tell me one time, you know, don't ever be afraid to cry because tears are love. Your authenticity shines through. And if that's pain, if that's 20/20 vision looking back, if that's guidance for somebody, if that's protection for somebody, if that's a testimony to the goodness that is still out here, you included all of that. This is going to stay with me for a while. Please, please keep sharing. You know, it's incredible what God does through pain and loss. It's incredible. That's all I wanted to say to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Kelly, I agree that was so powerful. I only wish that this COVID stuff was not so prevalent. We could have done this live. I know this was the first time you've done this by Zoom, right?
Yeah,
it was just as powerful. Don't think that it wasn't. This, you know, I don't know how it could have been more powerful, but I really wish we had a large audience. Wish we had a bunch of teenagers and people with drug addictions or family that was struggling with it. I wish there was 100 people on this call. Unfortunately, there's not. But you know what? We're going to keep working here in Lincoln County. We've got this core group. We're gonna keep working, and I hope I can ask you back to share your story again after this COVID thing is over, and we can pack a room.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for letting me talk. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you, Jolynn, for sharing your information on Rising Phoenix. And thank you, everybody who is on the call with us today. If you look over in your chat area, I shared a link at the top for the Lincoln County Health Department. It's the core page, and on that page is a resource guide. If you'd like to share that resource guide or add to it, we'll be meeting, the core group meets the first, when do we meet? First Wednesday, I think, of the month. And if you'd like to get on that list, it's pretty simple. My name is Ray Antonacci. My email is ray@lcad.net. That's like Lincoln County Ambulance District, so lcad.net. Just email me, and I'll be happy to get you on the email list for those meetings, and feel free to attend. We want to keep this moving forward. COVID has kind of really smacked us hard, and I'd say we're kind of moving backwards in a way that is not not preferential, but I'm going to push it forward. I'm not one to cancel or quit our forward momentum. And Kelli, you've invigorated me to keep moving forward on this. This is not something that we're going to stop. We're going to keep pushing it in Lincoln County and share it as much as we can. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and call it a night unless anybody else has anything.
No, I'm good. Bye, guys.
Bye, Kelli. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.